Are you sure it's safe for me to deliver here? Malcolm's voice was calm, but his hands tightened on the wheel as his co-worker, Corey, glanced at the mansion glowing like a fairy tale castle in the dark. Corey laughed, a dry chuckle. Safe? Man, the only thing dangerous here is the idea you could ever afford to live like this. Malcolm didn't respond. He pulled the delivery van to the curb, eyeing the wrought iron gates ahead. They loomed tall, black, and uninviting, much like the area itself, rich, exclusive, and unmistakably white. The buzzer at the gate let out a metallic shriek as Malcolm pressed it. A woman's voice crackled on the other end. Name? Malcolm Carter. Delivery for a Mr. Jackson, he said. There was no answer, just a click as the gate swung open. 3 days earlier, Vanessa Andrews had been sitting on her couch, scrolling through a dating app, her best friend Kayla giggling beside her. Okay, hear me out, Kayla said, her voice teasing. You swipe right on the first match, and whoever it is, you have to propose to him. Vanessa rolled her eyes but smirked. That's dumb. Who does that? You do. Kayla shot back. Come on. You've been single forever. It's time to live a little. Vanessa hesitated but laughed, agreeing. The first match popped up: Malcolm Carter. His picture showed him smiling in a faded work uniform, holding a clipboard. He wasn't her usual type, but something about his warm smile and honest eyes gave her pause. Against all reason, she swiped right. Malcolm wasn't expecting the message. He rarely checked his dating app. It felt like a cruel game for a man like him, someone working 2 jobs and barely making ends meet. But when he saw Vanessa's profile and her opening line, "Hey, are you ready to be proposed to?" he laughed out loud. They chatted for hours that night, and Malcolm found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years. Vanessa, despite her polished, upper-middle-class background, was unexpectedly grounded. She joked, she listened, and she made him feel seen. By the end of the conversation, she'd convinced him to meet for coffee. Back at the mansion, Malcolm carried the delivery up the wide marble steps. The front door opened before he could knock, and there she was, Vanessa. Her smile faltered the moment she saw him. Malcolm? Vanessa? He replied, equally stunned. Before either of them could speak, a man stepped out behind her. Older, commanding, his tailored suit an unspoken declaration of power. He frowned, looking between them. Who is this? This is Malcolm, Vanessa said weakly. The delivery man. The man's eyes narrowed. Well, let him do his job and leave. Malcolm held his composure, but something in his chest cracked. Vanessa's silence felt louder than any insult. She stepped aside, not meeting his eyes, and he set the package down on a gilded table in the entryway. Thank you, the man said curtly, handing Malcolm a crisp $20 bill as if dismissing him. Malcolm didn't take it. He turned to Vanessa, his voice low. You said you wanted to propose to me. Was that a joke? Her face flushed crimson. It wasn't a joke. I just don't. He cut her off. I get it. Without another word, he walked back to the van. The next morning, Vanessa couldn't shake the guilt. She texted Malcolm, apologizing, but he didn't reply. She tried again the following day and still nothing. Finally, she decided to find him. She remembered the address he'd mentioned, a modest apartment complex in the city. When she arrived, a little girl in pigtails ran past her in the hallway. Daddy, the girl yelled, leaping into Malcolm's arms as he stepped out of his apartment. Vanessa froze. She hadn't known he was a father. Malcolm saw her before she could slip away. His face was unreadable as he approached, his daughter still clinging to him. What are you doing here? He asked. I wanted to apologize, Vanessa stammered. I didn't mean to feel embarrassed being seen with me. Malcolm interrupted. His tone wasn't angry, just tired. Vanessa, you're not the first person to look at me like that, like I don't belong. That's not what I'm not mad at you, he said softly. I'm just done trying to prove I'm worth more than people assume. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. You're worth more. I was wrong, and I want to make it right. Malcolm hesitated, then nodded toward his apartment. Let's talk. As they sat in his small but cozy living room, Vanessa noticed photos on the wall. Malcolm in a graduation cap, Malcolm with his daughter at a park, Malcolm shaking hands with a man in a sleek office. Hit that subscribe button and join our loving family. Be the first to know when we upload a new story of love. And don't forget to like this video and share it with your loved ones. Let's spread some love together. Remember, love is not something you find. Love is something that finds you. And we hope that our stories find you and fill your heart with warmth, joy, and lots of love. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to the last photo. "That was the day I sold my first app," he said simply. Vanessa blinked. "Your app?" "Yeah," Malcolm said, shrugging. "I don't just do deliveries. I run a tech startup. It's still growing, but I've done okay for myself." Vanessa stared at him, stunned. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it shouldn't matter," Malcolm said. "Who I am isn't about how much money I have or what I do. But people like your father don't see it that way." Vanessa was silent, her mind racing. She'd almost let her own prejudices, her own fear, cost her the chance to know someone extraordinary. "I was wrong," she said again, her voice firm. "And if you'll let me, I want to start over." Malcolm studied her for a long moment before finally nodding. "All right, let's see where this goes." Months later, as Malcolm stood on Vanessa's front porch, dressed sharply for a dinner with her parents, he glanced at her nervously. "You ready for this?" he asked. Vanessa took his hand. "As long as you're with me, I am, this time." She wasn't letting go. Dinner at Vanessa's parents' house was a test, one Malcolm wasn't sure he wanted to take. The grand dining room gleamed with polished wood, crystal glasses, and a chandelier casting golden light over the table. Vanessa's father, Mr. Andrews, sat at the head, his presence heavy and authoritative. Her mother, Mrs. Andrews, was polite, but distant, the kind of woman who mastered the art of smiling without warmth. Malcolm was no stranger to tense rooms, but the weight of judgment here felt suffocating. Vanessa squeezed his hand under the table, a silent reassurance. "So, Malcolm," Mr. Andrews began, cutting into his steak with precision, "Vanessa tells me you're in tech." "Yes, sir," Malcolm replied evenly. "I run a startup focusing on community-based apps." "Community-based?" Mr. Andrews raised an eyebrow. "Sounds niche. Can it sustain itself long-term?" Malcolm resisted the urge to clench his jaw. "It's doing well. We've had steady growth, and our user base has expanded significantly in the past year." "Impressive," Mrs. Andrews chimed in, though her tone lacked conviction. "And you deliver packages as well?" "A bit of an odd combination, isn't it?" Malcolm met her gaze directly. "I like to stay grounded. The delivery job gives me a chance to meet people, understand their needs. It's helped me shape my business." Vanessa's father smirked, but before he could respond, Vanessa interjected. "Malcolm's work ethic is incredible. He's built something meaningful from the ground up. That's more than a lot of people can say." Her parents exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. As dinner wrapped up, Mr. Andrews invited Malcolm to his study. Vanessa tried to protest, but Malcolm placed a hand on her shoulder, nodding. "It's fine." The study was a shrine to success, mahogany shelves lined with books, awards gleaming in the soft light, and a desk that could have been an artifact from a museum. Mr. Andrews poured himself a glass of scotch, offering none to Malcolm. "Let's cut to the chase," Mr. Andrews said, leaning back in his chair. "You seem like a decent man, but you and Vanessa, you're from two different worlds." Malcolm's expression didn't waver. "With all due respect, sir, Vanessa can decide for herself what kind of world she wants to live in." Mr. Andrews took a slow sip of his scotch, studying Malcolm. "I've seen men like you before. Ambitious, driven, but ultimately out of your depth." Malcolm's voice was steady. "Men like me?" Mr. Andrews didn't flinch. "You know what I mean." For a moment, the air was heavy with the unspoken. Then Malcolm leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, with all due respect, I didn't come here to prove myself to you. Vanessa sees me for who I am, and that's enough. If you can't, that's your loss." Mr. Andrews set his glass down, his face hard. But before he could respond, the study door opened. Vanessa stood there, her eyes blazing. "Dad, stop!" Vanessa, her father started, but she cut him off. No, you don't get to decide who's good enough for me. Malcolm is a better man than most people in your world. And if you can't see that, then maybe you need to take a long look at yourself. Mr. Andrews was silent, his jaw tightening. Vanessa took Malcolm's hand, pulling him out of the room. In the car, Malcolm was quiet, staring out the window. You didn't have to do that, he said finally. Yes, I did, Vanessa replied. I'm not going to let anyone, not even my father, talk down to you. Malcolm glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. You're full of surprises, you know that? So are you, she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Months turned into a year, and Malcolm's startup skyrocketed, gaining national attention. Vanessa stood by his side every step of the way, challenging him, supporting him, and proving to everyone, including her parents, that their love was no fluke. At a gala celebrating Malcolm's success, he took Vanessa's hand in front of the crowd. This woman believed in me when few others did, he said, his voice steady, and I can't imagine a future without her. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. The room gasped as he opened it, revealing a simple but elegant ring. Vanessa Andrews, will you marry me? Tears streamed down Vanessa's face as she nodded. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. 1,000 times yes. The applause was deafening. But for Malcolm and Vanessa, the world felt quiet, as if it had finally stepped aside to let them live the life they had fought so hard to build. Together. In the corner of the room, Mr. Andrews watched with a conflicted expression. For the first time, he saw what his daughter had seen all along. Malcolm wasn't just good enough, he was extraordinary. It was a quiet Saturday morning when Vanessa stumbled across something that would change everything. Malcolm had left early to mentor a group of young entrepreneurs, and she was cleaning out a cabinet in their home office when she found it. A leather-bound ledger tucked away at the back of a drawer. Curious, Vanessa flipped it open and frowned. Inside were neatly handwritten entries listing investments, amounts, and dates. As she skimmed the pages, her heart raced. These weren't small investments, they were enormous sums. Malcolm had shares in tech companies, real estate ventures, and even a few international startups. The total at the bottom of one page made her gasp. She sat down, her mind reeling. Was this real? And why hadn't he told her? That evening, when Malcolm returned, Vanessa was waiting for him, the ledger on the table between them. You want to explain this? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Malcolm glanced at the book and sighed, running a hand over his face. I was wondering when you'd find that, Malcolm. This is millions of dollars. Her voice wavered. Why didn't you tell me? He sat across from her, his expression serious. Because I didn't want it to define me or us. Vanessa, when I started making money, I saw how it changed the way people looked at me. Suddenly, I wasn't Malcolm anymore. I was just the rich guy. I didn't want that to happen with you. Vanessa leaned back, trying to process his words. But I'm your wife. We're supposed to share everything, not just the struggles. You're right, Malcolm admitted. I should have told you. But honestly, I didn't want to burden you with the pressure of it. The money, it's just a tool. What we've built together, that's what really matters. Vanessa softened, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. I understand why you kept it quiet. But Malcolm, we're a team. From now on, no more secrets. No more secrets, he promised, taking her hand. Despite their renewed honesty, Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that her father needed to know. Over the years, Mr. Andrews had grown to respect Malcolm, but she still sensed a lingering doubt in his eyes, as if he were waiting for Malcolm to prove himself. One evening, over dinner at the Andrews mansion, Vanessa decided it was time. Dad, she said, setting her glass down. There's something you need to know about Malcolm. Her father raised an eyebrow. What's that? Do you remember the tech company he runs? Community Bridge? She began. It's not just doing well, it's a multi-million-dollar enterprise, Mr. Andrews blinked, momentarily stunned. I had no idea. Not just that, Vanessa continued. Malcolm's made several private investments over the years, smart ones. He's built a fortune, Dad, quietly, without anyone knowing. Mrs. Andrews gasped softly, her hand flying. to her mouth. Mr. Andrews stared at Vanessa, then turned to Malcolm, who sat calmly at the end of the table. Is this true? He asked. Malcolm nodded. It is, but like I told Vanessa, the money doesn't define me. It's just a means to an end. What matters to me is the work we're doing and my family, Mr. Andrews leaned back, folding his arms. Why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't want to change the way you saw me, Malcolm replied. When we first met, you judged me for being a delivery man. If you'd known I was wealthy, you might have judged me for that too. Either way, I wanted you to respect me for who I am, not what's in my bank account. For a long moment, the room was silent. Then Mr. Andrews stood, walking over to Malcolm and extending a hand. I was wrong about you, he said quietly. You've earned my respect, Malcolm, not because of the money, but because of the man you've shown yourself to be. Malcolm stood and shook his hand, the gesture sealing a long overdue truce. The revelation of Malcolm's wealth didn't change much about their lives except for the way Mr. Andrews now beamed with pride every time he introduced Malcolm to his friends. This is my son-in-law, he'd say, a self-made man, brilliant, hardworking, and one of the finest people I've ever known. Vanessa couldn't help but smile whenever she heard it. The barriers that had once divided their worlds were gone, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. As she and Malcolm continued to build their lives together, they knew one thing for certain: their love wasn't just about overcoming challenges, it was about creating a legacy of strength, honesty, and unity that would inspire generations to come. Hit that subscribe button and join our loving family. Be the first to know when we upload a new story of love. And don't forget to like this video and share it with your loved ones. Let's spread some love together. Remember, love is not something you find. Love is something that finds you. And we hope that our stories find you and fill your heart with warmth, joy, and lots of love.